everyone. Welcome back to the Roble Ventures entrepreneurship video series on how to launch, build, and fund your startup. I'm Marina Glazman, and I'm back here with Sergio Monsalve, founding partner at Roble Ventures. Today, in episode 3, we are going to look at market sizing. So, welcome back, Sergio.
Thanks, Marina, and welcome back, prospective entrepreneurs. It is very nice to be back for this third video in our series. Welcome.
So today, we're going to go on a deep dive into an area that confuses many entrepreneurs, but is critical to raising capital and to getting an early team inspired and on board. So that would be understanding and communicating the size of your market. But before we get into all the details, Sergio, how should entrepreneurs think about market sizing at a macro level?
So Marina, at a high level, we need to look at a market sizing from a perspective of not just how large the market is today, but also how the technology and the macro trends may actually change that size in unexpected ways as the market evolves. So we will need to think of the market not as a static thing, but as a constantly changing mechanism. To that end, I want to introduce a new notion, which I call BAM, the biggest aspirational market.
Since market sizing can be a somewhat ambiguous process, let's start by talking about the issues people usually face in calculating their market size. What are some of the common pitfalls?
Well, recently in the world of technology, we have realized we have grossly underestimated the size of a market in many cases. This applies for both VCs, entrepreneurs, but also public investors. There have been many surprises on the upside, especially recently. Think about this. We have several trillion-dollar companies now where their markets still are growing. Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and soon to be Facebook. Those are all trillion-dollar companies. Those companies still have a long runway to go before maxing out on their potential. And at the beginning, nobody would have expected that those companies would get to be $1 trillion plus. I myself was very surprised, actually.
An example that comes to mind is Udemy. Because they've grown exponentially in customer base and in their service offering, it's something that I tend to think about as you're describing this type of market. You were an early investor, right, Sergio? And you're on the board. So I think it would be great to get your take on market sizing for Udemy when they were pretty early stage. Did you have an accurate idea of how big they would actually become?
Yeah, this is interesting because 7 years ago, in 2014, I invested in Udemy when it was a nascent marketplace for education for tech workers in the US and in developed countries. I recently went back to look at that initial deal memo that I created when I was a partner at Northwest Venture Partners. And back then, I sized the market focusing on just developed country tech workers and basically focusing on a certain segment, which is the motivated knowledge seekers. My original thought was that Udemy would be great for tech employees where their jobs were changing rapidly and they were self-motivated to learn and get ahead in their careers. But what I failed to envision was the fact that lifelong learning would become a necessity for everyone in the world. So we sized the market inaccurately based on a certain number of people and multiplied by the number of courses they would take. Today, lifelong learning is relevant for anyone to take anything, not just tech workers. So my estimation actually is probably off by 80 to 100 times.
So that's a magnitude level difference in the projection versus the reality. Thankfully in your favor, I guess. But what exactly was off with the market assessment? How did you end up at that estimate?
Yes, there are two types of drivers, tangible and intangible. On the tangible side, we misunderstood the simple arithmetic of unit share times wallet share. Let me explain what I mean by that. On unit share, that's the number of available people to use the product. In the case of Udemy, we initially thought it was the motivated knowledge seeker tech workers in developed countries, but that was wrong. It is every single human being on the planet who can benefit from this service. So instead of a few 100 million people, we now have billions of people that we could address. Now, on the wallet share, it is the dollars that each person spends on the platform. And again, in the case of Udemy, we realized that once you took one course in the platform, you then would take many other courses that may or may not be tied to your work. It may be hobbies, curiosities, or maybe just a better way to spend the time than to watch Netflix.
So for unit share and share of wallet, we're talking about the number of people in a static market multiplied by the dollars they spend with you, right?
That's exactly right. That's the tangible side.
Okay. You also mentioned earlier that technology can actually change the market itself. Is this where the intangible factors come in? What are intangible factors? Can you elaborate a bit on that? And how do they impact market size?
Yes, essentially, intangible miscalculations have to do with the ways in which a new technology affects and alters human behaviors and ultimately expands the market itself. In other words, markets impact technology, but technology can also shape the market. And let me give you an example. Most of us have used Uber or Lyft, right? Well, Uber and Lyft enter the market as a new black car service for business class riders initially. But then not only did they present an alternative to taxis and carpooling, they did something not many people saw coming, which is that ride sharing technology shifted the behavior so significantly that even car owners started giving up their personal cars in favor of ride sharing. But think about this. New Year's Eve in San Francisco for me was a total mess before Uber. I can remember a time when my wife and I didn't even want to go out on New Year's Eve because neither of us want to be designated drivers or get stranded at a bar. But enter ride sharing and everybody started to go out. So Uber and Lyft not only changed the car purchasing market, but they also changed the bar market, the restaurant market, and the nightclub market, which is pretty astounding.
Got it. So, essentially, to recap, people often miscalculate tangible market sizing drivers because they underestimate the total addressable market, right? And even more frequently, people don't appreciate the impact of intangible drivers, like new technology changing the size and shape of the market, as we just saw with Uber.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so we talked about what not to do. Let's get into what you should do. How do you suggest that entrepreneurs approach sizing their market correctly?
Well, Marina, let's start with a tangible sizing of a market. And let's just go back to the Udemy example and use a specific helpful framework that I like to use. One is SOM. That's share of market or serviceable obtainable market. These are the customers and revenue your company can reach within the first 5 years. So essentially, this is the percent of the market you can conquer. In the case of Udemy, it is the percent of all online education worldwide. Then you go into SAM, which is the serviceable available market. It refers to a market that your direct competitors and you could address. If you're a monopoly, for example, the SOM and the SAM are equal. So this, in the case of Udemy, would be all adult online education worldwide. And the last one would be the largest, which is TAM, total available market or total addressable market. This refers to the combined revenue of all the companies in a specific market on an annualized basis. This includes direct competitors, substitutes, and incumbents. So in this case, in the case of Udemy, all adult education worldwide, including online and bricks and mortar, would be available in the TAM. So for the TAM to be penetrated by Udemy, you would have to assume that there'd be some migration of customers from offline to online.
Seems straightforward, except that I can still see how TAM might be confusing. Is total addressable market the largest possible market size?
Well, TAM is technically the maximum size of your market. That's only so long as you're operating with a framework of how people currently behave. That doesn't assume any changing behaviors. What I like to introduce is a measure that nobody talks about, which is what I call BAM, biggest aspirational market. Just like I mentioned in the example of Uber, which changed how I experienced New Year's Eve, other technologies can actually change markets. So game-changing technologies have their own gravitational pull on the market itself. One way to think about the BAM is to think about your market in a world where no incumbents exist. You get to shape the market. BAM should be somewhat qualitative, but is super helpful to have when selling a vision to your employees, investors, and other people that want to join your ecosystem.
Yeah, that is a new concept. It's not something I heard people talk about at all when we were raising capital. So that is interesting. Anyway, in the video, we've covered some of the common mistakes that people make while market sizing, and we also talked about SOM, SAM, TAM, and now, of course, BAM, biggest aspirational market. So as we wrap up, Sergio, is there anything else entrepreneurs should keep in mind about market size?
I think so. There's a final note I'd like to make on BAM. Great entrepreneurs can paint the picture of what the world could be, and they help us dream. Tesla, for example, has helped us dream about a carbon neutral world. Or SpaceX is helping us dream about a time when we might be living in Mars. Thanks to Elon Musk, we are now experiencing his vision of his BAM. And that's amazing.
Okay, well, that is what we have for today. That was our video on market sizing. Check out our linked resources below for further reading, as well as other videos in this series, including the one that we have coming up on competition. So thank you all for joining us, and see you next time.
Thank you so much, Marina, and thank you, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe and look for us in the next video. Thanks. Bye-bye.